Welcome everybody. Please sit comfortably so that you can relax and listen to our talk. We have one of our students, Marco, giving the talk today. Recently he received the precepts, which means he took vows to cultivate wise and kind thoughts, speech and actions for the rest of his life. And so part of the tradition is that when a person takes those vows, that they give a talk to share the sort of history of how they came to practice. So today we're going to be lucky to hear how Mark came to practice. So I'll pass it over to you.
Morning everyone. Apologise if I sound a little nervous, but that's because I am. So I'm sure once we get going we'll be fine. But perhaps starting at the beginning, I was born in the UK, and when I was 7, my parents emigrated to Australia, and then back to England when I was 12, and back to Australia when I was 13, and it was a pretty disrupted, unsettled childhood that I had. I went to 7 schools, and whilst I enjoyed it, it was, like I said, it was slightly chaotic. But once we got back to Australia, and we settled in the southern suburbs of Sydney, and there wasn't a great deal of love in the family. My father was a bit of a sort of a man about town, and my mother, I think, was just stunned by motherhood and didn't quite come to terms with it. But so I just took myself off and did my thing, and we used to do crazy things like we'd take a sandwich and a drink and head into the bush because the national park was right there. We'd cut down a kangaroo tail and we'd just spend the day terrorising each other, just stalking each other, and we'd be lying in the dirt under bushes, and I'm thinking, like now you think, snakes, bullheads, all these things. But at the time it was a life and death moment. So as far as not getting caught by your mates, when we were in England, we used to holiday in Jersey in the Channel Islands, and I really came to love the water, and I'd spend every day just in the water from dawn till dusk. And coming back to Australia, once we moved closer to the beach and Cronulla, that was it. I was in heaven, and I really felt like the water was nurturing me. It was my safe place, as odd as that might sound. And so I just spent the whole time just bobbing off North Cronulla, go to school, come back, bob a bit more, sleep. And we used to do crazy things, like we'd go out when it was too big, the surf was too big to take your surfboard out, you'd take these surf mats out. And I remember being pinned on the floor of South Cronulla, on the ocean floor, this massive wave crashing down around 13, 14. And I thought, oh gee, I'm probably gone for here. And I just managed to just get myself up, get a big gasp in before the next one hit. And so this was the sort of, you can see the behaviour pattern starting to form. And then one day my parents said, we're moving west. I thought, oh gee, it's a suburb or 2 west. And turns out it was actually the Blue Mountains, or at the base of the Blue Mountains. So my world caved in, or so it seemed. But I discovered motorbikes, and that substituted for there wasn't water, but there wasn't a surfboard, but there was a motorbike. And we used to, again, crazy stuff, chased by the cops on trail bikes, riding around quarries, and very exhilarating, but a bit silly. But as I I'm starting to. I'm in my final years of school, and I started to ask those questions that I'm sure we all ask ourselves, those sort of existential questions that what's it all about? Why am I here? And at the same time, I sort of essentially several pillars to my existence: the water, motor vehicles. The bikes just got me obsessed with cars and with bikes, and I started this expensive obsession that goes to this day. And I think safe death is the only thing that will stop me acquiring new cars and new bikes. And digressing slightly there, but with the questions and with the ocean no longer around, I started to reach out, and I didn't quite know where to go, and I started to find, I found a few unorthodox groups that I thought might help me. In the 80s, there was a group called the Rajneesh Sannyasins, and Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh was this very charismatic sort of leader. It was a cult, essentially, and but it was a cult based on some fundamental Buddhist principles, and basically it was to basically live fully in the world without attachment was Bhagwan's sort of big point, and that really manifests as just an acceptance of decadence, and it was champagne and dope, and it was just crazy, and I thought after a while, this is not where I need to be, and I wandered away. So that was my first sort of, at least, inkling of Buddhist principles, however sort of slightly corrupt they might be. A bit later on, a few years later, I came across the Satyananda Saraswati, which is he was a teacher of yoga and had this unusual sort of mix of all sorts of religions. But it was a great vibe. They had an ashram at Mangrove Mountain on the Central Coast. I used to go up there and be in the fields, and it was digging, and it was great fun, and a few circumstances conspired to basically force me out of there, and not force me out of it, but force me to move on, and nothing untoward, I can assure you. And I found myself again. Here's a bit of a taste, but it's not enough. It's not giving me what I'm looking for. So at this stage, I'm working and in my 20s, and back on the coast on the northern beaches, back with the ocean, and I just, whilst I've been surfing all through, I embraced life-saving, or life-saving embraced me, and that was it. I was just in my element. I had to be here at the beach and in the water, and we used to just create, I mean, it's that sort of that silly behaviour that is that you encourage each other. We go out chasing sharks. There'd be a shark on the shoreline. Out goes a boat, and rather than just chase the shark, the idea was to try and throw the crewman out of the boat into the water where the shark was, and there was a great laugh, and you can see this. I suppose it's a crazy machismo. Anyway, it continued on with my life saving, and I started to realise that life needed a bit more order about it, and I started taking sort of managerial positions, assistant chief radiographer, on committees and various things, and I like that. I just like order. basically. Not authoritarian, crazy order, but structure, I suppose, is what I'm talking about. I basically, continued with my life saving. I became a patrol captain at Bondi, and this crazy situation where I'm a chief radiographer running a practice during the day, and what do you do on a weekend? You manage a beach with 20,000 people on it, and it's just these levels were getting probably a bit too much for me, and it really crescendoed one Sunday afternoon when a big rip came up at South Bondi. A whole lot of people started heading off to Bronte in the rip, and I was controlling the rescue, I thought, and then I realised I had to go in as well because there was a guy who was about to get dashed on the rocks. I got him back to the beach, but I was just shattered, and I realised that I sort of met my threshold at that point, and I just needed to be a little bit more kinder to myself. So, just work took me to Melbourne, and surf's gone, but we lived at St Kilda, so the beach was there, so my water connection was still there. All the while, the cars and the bikes are just rolling through, and I was the chief at Moorabbin Hospital, and it's a fairly sort of responsible position. And in January 2009, it was a really hot summer. I'd been unsupported by my colleagues at work. They'd all not turned up for the shifts, and I was really stressed, and I felt really unwell. And I took myself to the doctor, and he immediately sent me to hospital, and the next minute I'm in this giant operating theatre. It probably wasn't big, but it felt vast, cold, stainless steel everywhere, and me climbing onto the table, ready for an operation. And the thought, I'm essentially on my own, and the thought occurred to me, you're about to have open heart surgery. You may not survive, and you're unprepared for death. So it was a pretty powerful thought. Anyway, I woke up, obviously, and I'm here. But that was the turning point. That was where I really felt the urge to just get on with finding some answers. And if I may, I'll just read a quote from, this is a book that Nettie and I are reading at the moment. It's The Eightfold Path Noble Eightfold Path by Bhikkhu Bodhi, and this was the opening chapter, and it was just, let me read it. The way to the end of suffering. The search for a spiritual path is born out of suffering. It does not start with lights and ecstasy, but with the hard tacks of pain, disappointment and confusion. However, for suffering to give birth to a genuine spiritual search, it must amount to more than something passively received from without. It has to trigger an inner realization, a perception that pierces through the facile complacency of our usual encounter with the world to glimpse the insecurity perpetually gaping underfoot. When this insight dawns, even if only momentarily, it can precipitate a profound personal crisis. It overturns accustomed goals and values, mocks our routine preoccupations, leaves old enjoyments stubbornly unsatisfying. The first such changes generally are not welcome. We try to deny our vision and to smother our doubts. We struggle to drive away the discontent with new pursuits. But the flame of inquiry, once lit, continues to burn. And if we do not let ourselves be swept away by superficial readjustments or slouch back into a patched-up version of our natural optimism, eventually the original glimmering of insight will again flare up, again confront us with our essential plight. It is precisely at that point, with all escape routes blocked, that we are ready to seek a way to bring our disquietude to an end. No longer can we continue to drift complacently through life, driven blindly by our hunger for sense pleasures and by the pressure of prevailing social norms. A deeper reality beckons us. We've heard the call of a more stable, more authentic happiness, and until we arrive at our destination, we cannot rest content. That's kind of where I was at. So I started looking around. Where do I go? How do I start this search? And I ended up at a place called the Tara Institute in Brighton, in Victoria. It's a Tibetan, it's a lovely old building, a Tibetan temple, and Geshe Doga was the teacher, and Geshe Doga spoke very little English, and so he had a translator, and they would spend. Michael was actually son of a Belgian and Greek parents, and had gone to a monastery in northern India, and stayed as a kid, as a 7-year-old. So he spoke almost perfect Tibetan, but they would argue all the time about the translations, and it just got messy. And I was thinking, this is not it. This is not what I'm looking for. And eventually, I just wandered away. It was a lovely big sangha. It was, but it was quite hierarchical. You know, it's when you get that many people into a space, it seems to naturally occur. But I got to absorb some of that Buddhist vibe. So I took myself off with my wife to Italy, and realised I had yet another love. But we came back. Obviously, still don't really have my path sorted, and we used to go to watch the soccer, and the people sat in front of us. There was one chap who was really a bit interesting and a bit different, and it turns out that Kunchok was actually a Tibetan monk, and the other two had sponsored him here, and we became really good friends. And if you ever are online and you sort of look over my shoulder, there's I have a really lovely Buddha, and Kunchok, the monk, actually brought that back, carried that around on his back, incredibly heavy, for 2 weeks around India, and brought that back for me. And it's very, very special. So I'm still not sorted, and then one Friday evening, I don't know quite how I came to find the Kadampa Buddhist group, but I did, in a very bright shop front in Lonsdale Street in Melbourne, and there was an English monk, fully robed, and giving a teaching, and I thought, wow, this guy's brilliant. I'm liking what I'm hearing here. And I took a deep dive into Kadampa Buddhism. After that, I actually visited the main temple in Ulverston in the UK, took tantric empowerments in Hong Kong, started to manage the altar, on a vast altar every weekend, and started teaching meditation, and then started helping other teachers with their classes, and eventually, boom, it just got too much. And it was, again, there's Mark mired in responsibility, and it's too much, and I basically walked away. So there, I'm sort of still wandering, still no real answers, and I found a Zen group in Footscray called Jikishoan, and this was just something really, really special. We were sitting in a little, essentially it was the lounge room of one of the senior teachers. It converted into a zendo, a permanent zendo I'm facing the wall and I'm thinking, wow, this is great. This is what I'm. And I really embraced my time with Jikisho. Met Ekai Koromatsu, who was the teacher. Terrible English, but an inspiring teacher all the same. And I was assigned to a mentor, Liam, who was about to go to Shoji in Japan to actually become a monk, to be ordained as a monk. And as Liam was leaving, he presented me with his rakusu, and I was just blown away. That was, having now known what's involved in making a rakusu, you could appreciate.
This is a rakusu.
Yeah. And it's all hand sewn. You think, wow, that he would give this to me, and I was just, tears and the whole bit. And to this day, he's in Shoji in Japan with Seiko Suzuki Roshi. Unfortunately, I had to leave Melbourne, and we found myself here in Canberra. I was sitting with the Canberra Soda Zen group for a while, and then they changed their hours. It used to be Sunday morning. It was fab, your Sunday morning, and then you'd launch into the day after that, and then they moved it to the afternoon. I thought, well, that doesn't work. So, with limited social time and family time. So we wandered away again. And then it must have been about May of 24, Tony Shields, who most of you know, asked me if I was going to Seishin, and I said, "What's Seishin? Who's?" Didn't quite know what he was talking about. And when we discussed the detail, it was I'd actually met Nettie at one of the Canberra Soda Zen sittings a few years earlier, and it's like, oh, brilliant, yes, that's so I took myself out to Silver Wattle and just had a wonderful time, and what a lovely non-judgmental sangha, non-hierarchical sangha we have, and we're really lucky that we have a teacher who is so generous and kind, and we understand every word you say. It's just a real bonus. So that's it. That's how I come to be sitting on this Zabuton. One last point: the cars and the bikes. 45 cars, 11 bikes. I'm up to. So, you see, it is an obsession. So, anyone have a question?
Yes, go ahead, Sampa.
Would you mind explaining, like, when you say precepts, is it something like you started to practice it in terms of the principles of Buddhism? And how much time did that really take to really get to terms of it?
Well, I'd started with Jikisho in Melbourne, so that was in about 2014. So it's really it's something that you build to. I mean, a lot of people think, that the people out there think that Zen is just is just sitting on your mat and just eyes closed, sitting on your mat. It's the moral code that's the most important part of Zen practice, as far as I'm concerned, and that is the precept. So it builds over time, and it's finding yourself in the right situation where you have the opportunity where you have a teacher who is happy for you to take your precepts. And to me, it's made a lot of difference. I really feel, Nettie, I stop and I think, don't do, Mark, hang on. How does this sit? and it's very easy to look at the black and white, the sort of the immediate interpretation, but the subtleness, when you start teasing the precepts out, you realise how complex and detailed a moral code is available to you, and it's up to you how much you deep dive into it. I suppose it's yeah.
Can I add a few
Please do rescue me.
No, it's wonderful. But just on a practical level, the way it generally works is at any time someone can decide they want to take these vows, take these precepts, and then the teacher sort of might say, well, let's just wait 6 months or something like that, or they might just say, okay, that's fine. And then it's usually about a year where you sew this it's called a rakusu, it's like a miniature Buddhist robe, and you hand sew it, and we meet every couple of weeks and do the sewing. And as you're sewing, you're contemplating that you're going to take these precepts, which is, things like taking up the way of not killing, of not speaking falsely, of not misusing substances, those kind of obvious things, but they are, as Mark said, quite subtle when you look closely at them. And then vows to do with right speech, and it's all really to do with right thinking, because the thinking precedes the speech. So you have this year where you're sewing and contemplating. We usually study a book together about the precepts. So that then when we actually have the ceremony, and we had the ceremony here, and it's, people are witnessing that you're taking these vows. So it's a little bit like when people get married and people witness their vow. It's got a similar quality. It's being witnessed by people. So it has this power. Once you've done jukai, the ceremony is called jukai, you find that you just catch yourself, as Mark said. You're about to say something and you just catch yourself and go like, no need to say that. Or you might think, I'll just have a bit more, and actually I don't need to. And it just kind of gets more and more subtle like that. And every time we meditate, we put the rakusu on, or in my case as an ordained priest, it's robes, which are also hand sewn. Each time you put it on, you're just aware, I've taken these vows. So it kind of strengthens your resolve to try and be a beneficial person in the world.
I was wondering, because you talked a lot about the ocean and how important it was, and what you do now that you're in Canberra, where there's a lake.
It doesn't quite cut it, does it? Fortunately, we have family in Wollongong, and so we stay there quite a bit, and I get my dose. I think as I've got older, I've sort of perhaps not quite so obsessive about them. But having said that, we're probably 2-3 years away from retiring, and we'll retire on the coast in Wollongong. So I'll be back. To be able to just sit and look at the ocean. It's like I did that all that. This changing panorama, and it's and all that soothing benefit that comes from that concentration. Yeah, it's the place to be, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, microdoses at the moment.
I can understand that. For me, it's a forest or bushland. It's same way that's my kind of place.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mark, thank you so much for sharing that story. It is so interesting to learn a little bit more about sort of everyone and about you. And sometimes I look around and I think, what has brought us here? We're so lucky to be here at the same time together under Nettie. but it's so interesting to hear your story as to where you've come and why you're here. So thank you for sharing that. It was so interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's interesting. Fiona gave her talk recently, and Fiona's childhood seemed like almost idyllic, loving parents and everything. And I've got these ratbag parents, and so I was listening to Fiona, thinking, wow, I couldn't be any different, It's, but again, we all arrive here via different paths.
Thank you for sharing.
Could I say one thing about how essentially we aren't different? Because essentially from the Buddhist perspective, we are all born completely pure, and we are born with a sense of interconnectedness with everything. But that sense of interconnectedness with everything gets tainted over time by culture, and then we sort of lose it a little bit. And so part of what practice is doing is reawakening in us this original sense of interconnection with everything, not just people, but plants and animals. And in our tradition particularly, something that we've taken on through the sort of Taoist tradition in China is a sense of connectedness with objects as well, that we all completely rely upon each other for our existence. So I think when we come together in sangha, we're getting that feeling again that we don't remember, but is actually in us from our birth.
Thank you.
So maybe we've got time for one more question or comment. Yi or Margaret, have you got anything you'd like to ask or comment?
No, I haven't, Nettie. My internet's been dropping in and out, so I've had a very sort of scattered sort of scattered message from you, but it has been very interesting, but I don't have any questions.
Oh, well, thank you for being here and being part of this. And Yi, I can see your son there in the background as well. All right. So we finish with chanting the second verse there, and then we all get up and do 3 full bows together. You can do standing bows if you prefer. Can you do a little clack across the top? Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.